Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Running Explained podcast. I am your host, Coach Elizabeth. And if you are watching this episode, you might notice, if you're on YouTube or Spotify video, that I'm sitting in what could possibly pass for maybe a podcast studio on a good day. It is, in fact, the other side of the room that I usually sit in, my office. So there you have it. And if you're listening, you don't care. So let's get into today's episode. So today we are going to break down all the different types of runs / workouts that you're going to see on your training plan in a structured training schedule, just in general as an endurance runner, and talk about what each one does physiologically, the benefit of it, kind of what it does to you and in your training, and also understanding how to make sure you're executing these runs properly with some help from COROS. I am thrilled to announce that I am now in partnership with COROS. COROS makes running watches, and I've been wearing a COROS watch since 2022. I have been wearing the COROS Pace 2 watch, and I switched over from Garmin. Before that, I was wearing the Forerunner and multiple models, and I switched over to COROS, and boy, am I glad that I did. I really never looked back. And I'm so thrilled that when they reached out to this, they said, would you be interested? And I said, yes, I would. Thank you so much. I would absolutely love to talk about how awesome COROS is, because it really is. Their watches, the optical sensor armbands, so you don't get chafing around your midsection. But anyways, I digress. But today, today we're going to talk about how to use your watch as a tool to accompany you in executing all these different types of runs, and specifically talk about some of the benefits and ways that you could use your COROS watch specifically to do these types of things. So I am so excited to be able to offer a little something. If you go and buy a new watch on COROS.com, COROS, you can get a free second watch band by using code RUNEXP at checkout. So you put the watch in the cart, you put the second strap in the cart, and then you enter the code RUNEXP. That's RUNEXP at checkout, and boom, that strap becomes free. Let's get started. Oh boy. So I thought about starting this episode bottom up, right? Easy runs, start at the low, slow end, go to the high, fast end. But I feel like that is maybe not as impactful as starting at the opposite end of the intensity spectrum, which is the high intensity stuff, which is the really, really fast stuff. What is this type of running? What role does it have in your training? And how can you make sure you're doing it correctly? So I am talking first about things that look classically like speed work, short intervals, fast intervals with rest or recovery in between. This looks like 5K race pace or faster or an RP. Go hard, right? Go all out. Maybe this is sprints. Maybe you include strides here, right? This is the stuff that is high intensity, short duration, and is, let's say, can be really fun to do. But we're typically doing these, when we do these types of workouts, we are almost always, I'm trying to think of an exception, because there's almost always an exception to the rule. And I'm trying to think we almost always do this intensity category of runs in an interval format. I can't really think of anything where you might do a single sustained tempo at 5K pace like you would for your half marathon. So intervals. Intervals. So the intensity zone we're working at here, this is the top end of our intensity zone. Broadly speaking, you have 3 basic intensity zones: low, moderate, and high. I know most watches in heart rate zones, they have 5 models or 7 models or whatever, but basically there are 3 major intensity zones: the high intensity stuff, the moderate intensity stuff, and the low intensity stuff. So we're going to start at the high intensity end of the spectrum and working our way down. And what differentiates, or the dividing line between high intensity and moderate intensity, is your lactate threshold. And your lactate threshold is the point at which the physiology we're not going to go super into, because that is another episode. I could talk about lactate threshold. And we talked about lactate threshold last year, the double threshold training, the Norwegian method episode. And I could talk about lactate threshold for another full episode. But your lactate threshold is the point at which, as Jonah Rosner would say, your effort goes from being sustainable to unsustainable. And what does that mean? So the lactate threshold is the point at which you start to accumulate blood lactate and hydrogen ions much, much, much more rapidly than you can clear them out, which eventually meaning it could happen within a minute or two, it could happen within 20 minutes, depending how fast and hard you're going, eventually will create an environment that is incompatible with energy production, and you will be forced to slow down because essentially your body isn't able to make enough energy, ATP, to sustain the pace that you're trying to run. And so that's about a 1 hour race pace, 1 hour race effort, between 45 minutes and an hour. So this is one of the, I think, a really, really handy dandy line in the sand for you to draw to understand kind of where, okay, if this is a major pillar in my intensity setup, if I understand where my top end is, most of us have no problems understanding our absolute maximum intensity. And then understanding where roughly that lactate threshold point is for you. So roughly 45-minute to 1 hour all out effort, all out race pace, all out race. So if you are a 60-minute 10K runner, then your lactate threshold pace effort is your 10K pace effort. If you're an elite half marathoner and you can run a half marathon in an hour, then your half marathon is more likely around that effort, that intensity is more likely around your lactate threshold. And so you understand what I'm saying. So understanding where this intensity zone is really important because as an endurance runner, a lot of what we try to do is sustain and endure for quite a long time. And that can be for 15 minutes or for 25 minutes or for 24 hours in some cases. And the most important, and so understanding where your lactate threshold is important because once you get to that point, intensity-wise, physiologically, you are, like I said, transitioning from sustainable to unsustainable. And so if you're trying to get your marathon tempo work in, pace you should be able to hold for a long, long time, but you're at your lactate threshold 15 minutes in, well, you went too fast. Anyways, so understanding lactate threshold, kind of where it is along your intensity spectrum is really important. And anything above your lactate threshold, this is the high intensity stuff that we're talking about. This is these are race paces that are shorter than an hour, certainly shorter than 45 minutes. This is where your VO2 max is. This is where your 5K pace is. This is where your mile pace is. This is where your sprints are. And again, the workout format of these is almost always, and if you have an exception to this, please let me know, almost always going to be an interval format. So you are running for a specific duration or distance, and then you are recovering, walking, jogging, resting, float, for a specific amount of time or distance or whatever, and then you're repeating. So this might look like I'm doing 8 by 400 meters at 5K pace with 2 minutes jog recovery in between each one. Well, pretty standard workout, right? But how do you know what your 5K pace is? Yeah. Okay. So this intensity zone, how do I say this? It's pretty small for most people. There's probably not that big of a difference between your, slightly faster than lactate threshold pace and your 5K pace or, even your 3K pace or 2 mile pace. And yes, they're going to be different from each other, but I'm not saying your lactate threshold pace is going to be, I'm going to pull a number out of the air, 8 minutes per mile, and your 5K pace is like 5 minutes per mile. They're pretty close to each other, right? We're talking about 20 seconds per mile, or we're talking about kilometers, like 10 to 12 seconds, 14 seconds, they're pretty close together. So when we talk about what specific pace should I run, we are typically hyper-focused on always being at that very specific pace all the time. And so what a lot of us do is we put this workout in, I'll talk about programming workouts in a second. We put this workout in and we say, okay, and we maybe think to ourselves, I know my target pace. If you do, I'm going to go out and try to run that specific pace every single rep, the entire workout. What happens is you get out there and you're checking your watch constantly. Am I on the pace? Am I on the pace? Am I on the pace? Oh my gosh, I'm too fast. Oh my gosh, I'm too slow. Am I on the pace? Check, check, check. Oh my God, I feel like I never found my groove and now it's time for recovery. And I think I went too fast and then I went too slow and then, okay, gotta go again. What pace am I running? What pace am I running? When at the end of the day, what we're really trying to help ourselves understand is what different intensity zones feel like without needing to check our watch all the time. Notwithstanding the fact that you are going to fluctuate in pace from literally step to step, and it is normal for your pace to fluctuate just as you run. We're not robots. We do not run at a constant speed. You're also just in that, going to have normal pace fluctuations, but also have a range in general that you're trying to hit. Oftentimes we judge a workout by how successfully we were able to hit a very, 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 very specific pace. And being in the proper range and executing the workout correctly so that we're able to get stronger as the workout progresses. We didn't totally burn out on rep 1 and we're like dragging ourselves to the finish by rep 8. And that is far more important. Being in the right intensity range, being in that pace range, learning to run by what it feels like, and executing the workout properly is far more important than am I running this specific pace the entire time. And so the way that I like to set these workouts up in my watch, because we want to perform well, we want to do a good job. And then we put a bunch of pressure on ourselves and then we are constantly watching our watch. What I like to do is when I set up these workouts, I also like to set up activity alerts. So this is an alert. You can set up alerts for heart rate or for pace, a bunch of different things that essentially will buzz you or alert you when you are out of a zone that you've designated or you're above a specific thing, right? So if I'm in this example, let's say that I am trying to run, I'm doing, 8 by 400 meters at 5K pace or 5K race effort, and with 2 minutes jog recovery in between each one. And so in this workout, I would set a pace range, probably 10 or 15 seconds. So let's say if my goal was to run 7:30, I'm trying to run a 7:30 pace average 5K. If I were to program the activity alerts into my watch, I would probably choose a little bit faster, right? 7:25, probably like 7:40. And I know that if I'm somewhere in that range, more likely than not, I am doing the right thing in the right place. And so what happens is that when I set up those activity alerts, and that you can do when you go into your watch and you choose your activity, right? So hit the main dial and then choose run. And then if you haven't pre-programmed the workout into your watch, which you can program in the app and send them to your phone. But what you can do, so it's under activity alerts. So you simply just scroll down when you're in the run activity menu. So you start basic intervals. I love this. You can just set up intervals. That's how I do strides at the end. Activity alerts. All right. So I can do just pace alerts. So this would be turning it on. It's not automatic. And then I would edit the pace. So alert when above or below the selected pace range. And so you can set a custom range, or you can set a range like a zone that you've already preset for your profile in the app, but it'll buzz you when you are either too fast or too slow. And so knowing that I have that pace range available and I don't have to constantly check my watch, I know that it will buzz me, but that also allows me the freedom and the focus to try to just run the workout and to focus on what it feels like, and then to have pace almost be incidental. It's like you have guardrails on, but you're doing the driving. So that's one feature that I really like. You can use it with pace. You can do heart rate. I mean, essentially the way that I help keep my easy runs easy and have forever and ever and ever, when I'm trying to be super honest, to set up a heart rate alert, activity alert, to buzz me when I go above a certain heart rate. And then I know, got to slow down. So what do these high intensity intervals do? You might think that the harder the workout, the more effective that it is. And to that I ask, effective at doing what? So just because it's hard doesn't mean that it is more effective. Like it's not necessarily going to do a better job at something because it's hard. It does very specific things, and it does some of those things much better than other intensities. But at the same time, it doesn't do everything. And that's why we can only do a little bit of this high intensity training in our training week. These reps are typically anywhere from 30 seconds to probably about 5, maybe 6 minutes in duration. 6 is long. Yeah. I mean, if you're like, end of 5K training and you're doing 1200 meter repeats, yeah. So, between 1 and 6 minutes. Again, high intensity stuff. Typically have in these types of workouts, the standard structure is equal duration recovery. Or you can also manipulate that. So if you were doing your repeats, let's say you're running 400 meters in 2 minutes, 8-minute pace, and you would have 2 minutes recovery. If you were running it in 90 seconds, you could have 90 seconds recovery. Now, obviously, we're totally getting in the weeds here. We're not talking about program workouts, but I'm talking about what these workout structures typically look like. So what do the high intensity stuff do? It helps raise your ceiling. Easy running raises your floor. High intensity running raises your ceiling. And so we're talking about your ceiling in terms of your anaerobic capacity, your ability to create energy without oxygen, and not being affected by paying the price of as much of the lactate and hydrogen ions that are accumulating. It improves your neuromuscular fitness. It improves your ability to recruit muscle fibers to fire all at once, essentially, and the slow twitch and the fast twitch, and all of the other hybrid fibers in between. And it improves your VO2 max, so your maximal ability to uptake and use oxygen. It improves your cardiac output, how much blood you pump with each heartbeat. And a lot of this stuff happens at all intensities, essentially, like physical activity is good for you and will do a lot of these things, cardiorespiratory activity. But from a specific performance standpoint, this is what it does. It improves your anaerobic capacity, your maximal ability to uptake oxygen. It improves your psychological ability to tolerate that kind of discomfort. It improves your tolerance for lactate and hydrogen ions being in such high quantities in your bloodstream. Works your fast twitch muscle fibers, and also will prep you for the race you're trying to run. So I would say the big mistake with this kind of stuff, this stuff is fun to do for most people. And so our tendency is to overdo it or to do it too fast. And so when I talk about executing these types of runs correctly, and I talk about setting guardrails, and I talk about using activity alerts and kind of whatever is going to help you stay in the place you're supposed to be in, it's because, along with many other things, oftentimes with interval training, our tendency is to pretty much go as fast as we possibly can, or almost, for the duration of the thing. And then be really proud that we ran so fast on some of these reps, not really paying attention to the fact that we did not execute the workout as it was intended to be executed. We did something entirely different instead. So in this situation, and I've probably run far too many workouts that look just like this, out of wishful workouting, is that, let's say we're going back to our 8 by 400 meters at 5K pace. And let's go back to our 8-minute goal 5K pace. If my aim is to run my 5K in an average of 8 minutes per mile, that doesn't give me a lot of wiggle room to start slow and finish faster because 5Ks are so short. But what can get carried away with is that we think, if I can run hard on the first rep, make sure I get out strong, see how it goes. We often overshoot it. We overrun it. So in this situation, I might, again, this is probably something I've actually literally done. I'm targeting 8-minute pace. Let's say I would go out and do this workout. My first rep, I'm like, I'm going to show myself what I'm made of. We're going to hammer this. I'm going to nail this workout. And instead of starting out strong, but slightly conservative and trying to really dial into what 8-minute pace feels like, I'm essentially just barreling around the track or down the road. And I finished that first rep in 7:25. 725 minutes per mile. Sorry, kilometers, people. It's too fast for what I was supposed to be doing. But then something weird happens in our brains. And we look at the pace that we ran on the first rep and we think, oh my God. Yeah, I'm going to run that pace the whole time, or maybe faster, because look what I've just done. Look what I've just proven to myself. Well, nothing. You've proven to yourself that you ran that first rep of a workout way too fast, and now you're going to run yourself into the ground trying to run a 5K pace workout at, I mean, in this situation, mile race pace. And then when we crash and burn at the end of our workout because we can't run mile race pace for a 5K pace workout, we blame ourselves and we say, F that. Wow, that was so hard. Oh man, I can't believe I totally flamed out. Like, God, I couldn't even finish that last rep. Oh my God, I'm so not ready for my race. You are judging yourself on a workout that you just didn't do properly. It's like, do you know there's like a subreddit about recipe ratings for people who made so many substitutions to the recipe that it's essentially no longer the same thing. Like the comment on an apple pie recipe would be like 1 out of 5 stars. I replaced the flour with my own tears and I replaced the sugar with oatmeal and this tasted terrible. And it's like, yeah, obviously, because you didn't make the thing that it was supposed to be. So you're judging it on totally different criteria. Having these guardrails in place will make it more likely that you will stay on target, stay on task in your workout. It helps us keep our egos in check, honestly, more than anything. With the easy runs too, but especially with the high intensity stuff. When you're running at that speed, it's really challenging. And like I said, above your lactate threshold, a lot of those paces are pretty close together. It's really challenging to differentiate between those different paces and intensities, I'm going to say effectively in some situations. So you do feel like you're constantly speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down. And that doesn't feel good. It's also really, it's an inefficient way to run in general. So when you are trying to gauge exactly being in that perfect spot, like it's really challenging to do. And so we spend way too much mental energy trying to hone in specifically on the exact pace that we're supposed to be running, when mental energy is energy that you also spend that you can't spend on other things. So if you are spending more mental energy than you need to in that workout, that's not good, right? So all of this to say, executing these types of workouts, what they do, where you will typically find them, and how to execute them appropriately. So I think the pace range stuff is, like I was saying, kind of pace guardrails, those pace alert guardrails, I think are more effective for the high intensity stuff because those paces are so close together usually. But also with heart rate is, I love heart rate. Trust me, I think heart rate training is a fabulous tool for a lot of runners, but it's not something you can use interchangeably with a metric like pace, because the way that your heart rate responds to different intensities and the way it lags behind where you are on your intensity spectrum. When you start running, you start your easy run, your heart rate is low, and then it will slowly, as you run, slowly rise. It's not like you start running and boom, your heart rate is automatically up. Same thing with workouts. And especially when you're doing interval workouts that are so short, you essentially it's like your heart rate's not even going to get to where it's going to be at the end of a rep, but by the time you finish the rep. That's why I think pace is a more valuable metric to use as a guideline along with RPE. How does this feel? Better than heart rate. But that leads me to our next category, our moderate intensity category. We're climbing down the ladder of intensity. So we've already focused on raising our ceiling and finding those workouts, those high intensity workouts. You typically will not find more than, commonly in a speed block, you probably are rarely going to see 2 high intensity workouts more than two high intensity workouts in one training week. And you will typically see these more commonly Obviously in shorter race training cycles, 5K training, 10K training, maybe in half marathon training. You might see them at the beginning of something like a half marathon or a marathon training session. So you're getting some high intensity before you go into a lot of low and moderate intensity work. But what else am I going to say about this? But it's really easy to overdo it. So you probably shouldn't be doing a lot of these multiple times per week. You probably shouldn't be doing them on back-to-back days. And for most people, if you're doing, depending on where you are in your training, a really solid speed work session, faster than lactate threshold, once per week, again, not in post-race recovery, maybe not in base building. It does depend. But one per week is going to be great for most people. You probably don't need to do more than two, and you probably aren't going to see more than one if you're in training for a longer race. All right, down to the moderate intensity stuff. You raised your ceiling. Now we're in that moderate intensity zone. Now, your moderate intensity zone, depending on who you are and your level of fitness, blah, 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 blah. This could be a massive zone. Massive zone. So this is bounded on the upper end by your lactate threshold and on the lower end by your aerobic threshold. Hold on, sorry. I do have an outline that keeps me on track, believe it or not. I don't just sit down here and ramble. Okay. Although I try not to. All right, moderate intensity. Okay, moderate intensity runs. Upper end, lactate threshold. Lower end, aerobic threshold. Moderate intensity stuff. This is where most race paces that aren't 5K pace or 10K pace for some people are. So a race pace that is a race that takes you an hour or longer to finish. So half marathons, 15Ks, all the weird distances, everything in between. And then on the lower end by your easy effort threshold, your aerobic threshold. So this intensity zone can be very low moderate or it can be high moderate. So this zone, I would say, I think is the most challenging zone for people to really spend time in because it can feel so different at the lower versus the upper end. And sometimes you may not even realize that you're in a moderate intensity zone, but you are. So this is on a scale of 1 to 10. If the high intensity stuff is 8, 9, 10, then this is the 4-ish, 4 is kind of the dividing, 5, 6, 7. So this is, I can speak in a sentence. I don't really want to, but I could. If I do talk in full sentences, I'm most likely going to feel like I'm out of breath because of it. This is the intensity zone at which lactate accumulation is rising. Hydrogen ions are rising, but they haven't reached that skyrocketing point of lactate threshold. But if you run for long enough in this moderate intensity zone, then yeah, you're going to get a significant accumulation of lactate and hydrogen ions. And what this intensity zone does is some people refer to it as aerobic strength or your aerobic zone. So, I don't love those terms because yes, you are still predominantly aerobic, but you're also burning a significant amount of energy. Okay, it's not to say that it's incorrect. It's that oftentimes when I hear the word aerobic used in the context of training, it's often talked about as it's supposed to be easy, it's slow, it's easy. And your aerobic system is on and working all the way up through your intensity. It's just that the anaerobic stuff, burning carbohydrates especially, but then burning carbohydrate anaerobically, happens at moderate and high intensities in greater and greater amounts. So when we call this the aerobic strength, it's not about necessarily improving your aerobic endurance. It's not doing the same thing as an easy run, but it's helping you learn to sustain moderate intensities that are still predominantly aerobic, but are not easy. So we are talking about tempos. We're talking about half marathon pace. We're talking about marathon pace. So tempo runs, essentially tempo and threshold. Everything that you're going to find in this zone is probably called either something tempo or something threshold or just moderate. So this intensity zone obviously is where a lot of race pace work is going to be, but beyond helping sustain specific paces, but physiologically what allows you to sustain those paces, it helps you improve your ability to buffer and clear. So buffer hydrogen ions and clear lactate. Yeah, so the hydrogen ions and the lactate, which are produced as a byproduct of burning carbohydrate for energy, your body can get rid of them. It's kind of like if you are it's like if you're on a boat and you have the oarsmen who can row all friggin' day, but are kind of slow, or you can turn the motor on, except when you turn the motor on, that also opens up a hole in the bottom of the boat. So you're going fast, but you're gonna eventually sink. But what the buffering process, what the clearing process does, it essentially helps bail out some of that accumulation so you don't sink as quickly. And if you're very well trained, you can spend a long time in this zone. But that does take a lot of work to get there. So this is that moderate intensity zone. So it helps you clear lactate and hydrogen ions that are being produced so that you can sustain that effort, that intensity for longer without sinking / hitting your lactate threshold and moving into unsustainable territory. It improves your ability to recruit muscle fibers as fatigue accumulates. So this is really important, that a lot of what we do as endurance athletes is essentially about trying to fatigue and pre-fatigue and fatigue this, and now I'm fatigued and like avoid fatigue, all this stuff. So essentially your muscles are made up of little bundles of fibers. And each muscle fiber contracts individually. And it's either on or it's off. So when you are, let's see, when I'm slowly doing a dumbbell curl, I am recruiting some muscle fibers. But if I were to do a really fast dumbbell curl, like a really heavy, all the way up, like big, strong, that would recruit more muscle fibers. What happens with your muscle fibers is that they will fire until they get tired. And then when they get tired, they stop. And then another muscle fiber typically will pick up the slack. And so what happens essentially is that as you fatigue, you're kind of going down the chain of the muscle fibers that you recruit to kind of do the thing. Hey, this guy conked out. I need you to come and do your duty. And so this typically happens again when we are able to accumulate enough fatigue for this process to work in the way that we want it to. And sometimes with our higher intensity workouts, they're so short and they're so high intensity that this is not necessarily where this excels, but the moderate intensity stuff really does. Because especially with longer moderate intensity work, it really gives your body a chance to run through like all the muscle fibers that it needs to recruit so that it gets better at recruiting them next time. Essentially, it makes us more efficient. This is also really important for, like I said, for your race pace work, making sure that you're comfortable at race pace, making sure that the race paces that you've chosen are right for your fitness level. Let me see here. What else we got? Oh yeah, specific. Yeah, the phrase for that is called specific endurance. Okay, so the specific endurance we are trying to cultivate at a race pace, at a pace. Let's go back to our 8-minute pace, but in this context, let's say it's our half marathon pace. I'm trying to build my fitness for this 8-minute per mile half marathon goal pace. And to do that, I need to do obviously more than just run a ton of 8-minute per mile race pace stuff, which you might think that's the way to do it. That is not. I mean, eventually, if you don't injure yourself, it will probably get you there, but there are more effective ways to do it, like this. A lot of easy stuff, some moderate, some high intensity. But then when we're talking about some of the moderate intensity work, in this situation, I would say most of our moderate intensity work is going to be lactate threshold. So like right around that 1 hour race effort, the higher our lactate threshold, typically the better we perform. And I'm going to want to create or build specific endurance. So if I have all the general components to do that, it's like gathering ingredients for a recipe. I have all the ingredients in place. I have my aerobic endurance. I have my VO2 max. I have all these different aspects of my fitness that will allow me, hopefully, to run that goal on race day. But what I need to do is build up some specific endurance at race pace or at race effort. And so that's the role that race pace tempos will play in training typically. Now, race pace work is different from what lactate threshold work, that 1 hour-ish race pace work, in that I consider lactate threshold work to be a foundational type of workout that builds your fitness. It's not specific endurance building. It is general fitness building. Like, it's important to have a high lactate threshold. It's important to include that in your training. But unless it's also a specific race pace, like it helps support the other paces that you're trying to run on race day. And so, or where was I going with this? Yes. So same thing with when we talk about running our interval workouts too fast. This can often happen with our moderate intensity zone because we don't realize we can get pretty close to lactate threshold in some cases without realizing it. So building that specific endurance, what does this feel like? What does this pace feel like? What does this intensity zone feel like? It improves your ability to burn and use different types of fuel sources, since you are burning fat and carbohydrates in pretty reasonable quantities at that intensity. What else does it do here? Yes. And then one of the most important things is that if you're using this in a tempo capacity, and tempo, I mean race pace stuff, not threshold, which is that 1 hour effort stuff, is that it helps build your confidence that I can do this. Now, again, some people take it to the extreme. They do only that and think it's going to give the most confidence, when the most confidence comes from knowing that you are in control. I really think that's what brings the most confidence. The most confidence I think you can have in a race or in a workout is knowing that you are pretty much in control of what you're doing. You're not at the whim of what's happening. You're not guessing. You're not just throwing something at the wall and hoping it sticks. And so having this ability to build confidence in sustaining specific paces, or finding different intensity zones, or managing different, pacings, so like all these things build your confidence and say, yeah, I can do this. I can do this. This is also really helpful, just in general, for teaching yourself how to be conservative at the beginning and stronger at the finish. Just one of the best things I think we can learn how to do is to ever so subtly negative split our workouts. But if you want to learn more about that, you can listen to the episode I did with Jason Fitzgerald. I think we talked about it at the Mastering a Faster 5K episode. So the format of these moderate types of workouts will typically start, you might see them on your schedule first as intervals. So there's really no wrong way to do this. You can program moderate intensity stuff in long continuous blocks. You can do run 30 minutes at this pace or this effort, or you could do intervals, like 6 by a mile at marathon pace. And then over time, eventually, you'll be running long stretches of marathon pace. Same thing with half marathon pace. And so having the workout structure of, in this situation for moderate intensity stuff, the alert that I use is for all of it. Yeah. Is setting an alert, setting a heart rate alert at my lactate threshold heart rate. Because for the moderate intensity workouts, once I hit my lactate threshold, we're out of the zone. We're out of bounds. We're in the wrong place. I've been working too hard. So if my goal is to stay with this intensity zone, I'm trying to run in this situation, let's say a specific pace. I'm trying to aim for that pace, but I'm also trying to stay under my lactate threshold, because if I'm going to have to stay under my lactate threshold for most of the race. And so having that heart rate alert is really helpful. So again, you can go in, it's one of those activity alerts. So you pace alert, heart rate alert. And again, I would strongly recommend, if you're going to use heart rate in your training, that you have an accurate measurement device. So you can use your watch. Like I said, in some cases, it can be accurate for some people, but I really do like the strap. And so this is why I use the COROS heart rate armband monitor. Goes on your upper arm. You don't get that chafing around your middle. And I know my heart rate's being accurately measured so that I don't have to worry about it. I hate being in workouts or, running along and be like, I know that I can't trust my heart rate. It says this and I have feelings about it, but I also know it's not wrong. I also know that it's wrong. So yeah, no more of that. just run, but set that heart rate alert. How do you find your lactate threshold heart rate, you might ask? I'm so glad that you did. So you can field test your lactate threshold heart rate by doing a 30-minute time trial. And again, wearing a strap or your armband, not using your watch, your average heart rate for the final 20 minutes of that effort, that average is your estimated lactate threshold heart rate. So if you were to run the 30-minute time trial, and you can substitute a race for this, but it's 30 minutes as fast as you can frickin' run, ideally pretty much roughly the same pace the whole time. You can't start out super slow and speed up. You can't start out super fast and then slow down. And that 20 minutes, the first interval is 10 minutes, second interval, 20 minutes. And you can set up a workout like this on your watch. So it would be probably a 15-minute warm up, and then you start the 30-minute section itself. The first section is 10 minutes, the second segment, and then the second segment of the 30 total minutes is 20 minutes. So it's not like you're taking a recovery in between, but what you're getting is that split in your workout. When you set it up, you can do that in the app. It's automatically going to tell you your average heart rate for each segment. And so you can just look at your average heart rate for that 20-minute segment, and that is your estimated lactate threshold heart rate. So for me, that's about 174 beats per minute. So when I program in this heart rate alert, I just want to know, like, I want to stay below my lactate threshold heart rate. And that helps me do it. So that's one, I think, a really valuable tool for understanding how to stay in your moderate intensity zone and not necessarily try to have to, again, worry about pace all the time. You can focus more on executing your workouts properly. If your pace is whatever on that day, it's no big deal. The other thing about moderate intensity workouts too is that they can feel pretty comfortable at the beginning and pretty hard at the end. So again, it's easy to overdo it, but that's why I like having the lactate threshold heart rate alert. All right. Last but certainly not least, we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that is the easy running stuff, the easy runs. So again, I think one of the most valuable tools for easy effort running to help make sure that we're staying in the zone is heart rate. Does not mean you have to use it. I just find it incredibly helpful because pace fluctuations occur on the daily, conditions change, fatigue changes, but where your aerobic threshold is doesn't change from day to day. Over time, it can if you improve it. It's what's called a trainable attribute, something that improves through training, just like your lactate threshold. Just like your VO2 max, actually. Just like you, just like all of us, like the whole point, like can be improved through training, is that it keeps you honest and it keeps me from looking at the pace and thinking, oh my gosh, not today. That's terrible. Yeah. So that's why I like having the heart rate alert. So you don't have to worry about, am I in the right pace? It is humbling, right? It is a bit of kind of an ego check that on some days you're going to need to be probably much slower than you would prefer, but understanding that you are in the right zone because you're keeping yourself there with your heart rate, so super valuable. And the other thing too about all of these kind of alerts and checks is that the whole point is that it's supposed to aid your understanding of how these different things feel. One of my favorite games to play, and I'm really good at it now, my favorite games to play is that when I'm on an easy run and I'm gauging it with heart rate. So I have the heart rate alert on, and I know if I'm running along, I can sense, I think I'm getting up towards the top of my easy threshold. It hasn't buzzed at me yet. I try to guess my heart rate. And you will be shocked at how freaking accurate you can get at this. And it's not a parlor trick. It's not like, so what do you do with that? What that means is that you are so attuned to how you feel in that moment that you know what your heart rate is. How cool is that? What an amazing connection that you have made. The goal is to make those types of connections at all your intensities across your intensity spectrum. Probably not like as strongly because we spend a lot of time in our easy zone, more time in our easy zone than we spend in any other zone. So it can be easier to do this at lower intensities, but that's what we're trying to cultivate is, okay, I know where I am without necessarily having to look. Because what is that? That is confidence. That is you being able to trust yourself that you can do this, that you're not at the whim of external factors or things that you're like, oh, I don't know why this happens. Sometimes it just does. You are the one in charge. And so that's why I say having your watch as a tool is incredibly valuable. The goal of having a watch is not to make you reliant on the watch for the rest of your life. The goal is to help teach you how to become a better runner so you can more effectively use the tool. And a lot of that has to do with, well, how does this feel? Kind of figuring out where you are before you look at it. Having these alerts and guardrails in place to keep you in the place you want to be in without always having to check your watch. So I think just these really simple but really helpful features are very, very, very valuable when you're trying to execute specific types of runs, if you're trying to keep yourself honest, if you're trying to, there are many ways that you can use this. And one of the most important things about the easy effort stuff, I haven't even talked about what easy running does. All the really important stuff. Easy effort running improves your aerobic endurance. It improves your mitochondrial density, the number of mitochondria that you have, as opposed to the high intensity stuff, which improves your mitochondrial size. So fun fact, the high intensity stuff, raising the ceiling, mitochondrial size. The low intensity stuff, raising the floor, mitochondrial density. So you're building more powerhouses and you're also making them bigger, but more. The easy running stuff builds more powerhouses. Just something called capillary biogenesis, or no, angiogenesis. There's something, it's mitochondrial biogenesis, capillary angiogenesis. Long story short, more capillaries because you have more powerhouses, more roads to more power plants. Mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. And so when we're here, we're building our aerobic capacity, we're building our fatigue resistance, we are overall just building our capacity as runners. Like, that's what it is. This is where a lot of our running is. It is slower. Some might call it boring. You might think it's not as effective because it's not hard. But an easy run is doing all the things that it's supposed to do when it's not hard, when it is on some days kind of boring. By and large, your easy run should be pretty uneventful. They really should. You should just go out and be like, yep, did it. Awesome. Cool. Moving on with my day. Broadly speaking, the more easy running that you can do, the faster of a runner you will become. You are able to increase your volume of training more when you add more easy running as opposed to adding more moderate or high intensity running. You'll be shocked at probably how much you could run per week if you really actually spend a lot of time in your easy effort zone. And this is also, I think, again, going back to the endurance thing, we think of that moderate intensity zone, that aerobic strength zone, as the most important zone for a lot of our race pace stuff. And this is simply not true. Your aerobic strength is built upon your aerobic foundation, and that is built in your easy effort zone. So you can only be strong aerobically if you're already big aerobically, I guess that makes sense. Like you can't fine tune something that doesn't exist. So if I don't have the endurance to run for 2 hours at my half marathon pace, it kind of doesn't really matter what else I can do at half marathon pace because I don't have the endurance to sustain it. So easy effort running improves your aerobic capacity, mitochondrial density, more capillaries, which is always really good. Improves your, running in general, but improves your blood plasma volume, allows you to run more without reducing your injury risk. It allows you to run more. And that was running more in your easy effort zone, again, is far less likely to get you injured than running more in your moderate or high intensity zone. And it helps keep running feel good, honestly. Who cares if it's boring sometimes? Make it a you time, honestly. And what else? Improves your ability to burn fat for fuel at higher intensities, which is good. This is energy. Again, adding oarsmen to your boat. That's what we want. It also improves your ability to spare glycogen for when you really need it. So like, let's say in this boat, and I really like this boat analogy. In this boat analogy, our aerobic capacity is not so great. And we only have a handful of oarsmen, and they're okay. They really do try, but they get tired really, really easily. So what we've been doing is we've kind of been like turning the motor on every couple minutes just to like get us a little speed ahead. And like, yeah, okay, the hole does open up. And yeah, I mean, we haven't been able to bail out all the water. But you see where I'm going with this? Easy effort running adds more oarsmen to your boat, so you don't have to turn the motor on unless you really need it. And easy effort running is one of the most challenging runs to execute properly if you've never really spent a lot of time here. And this is where I think having that heart rate guide can be helpful. So we talked about this on the Zone 2 training episode. Again, thinking back to lactate threshold field testing, you can get your aerobic threshold tested in a lab if you want. If you roughly know where your maximum heart rate is, not age-based, you actually have to go out and test it. I would recommend just getting it from like a 5K race or something. And again, you have to be wearing an accurate measurement device or a lactate threshold field test. Kind of understanding where those high-end metrics are will help you guesstimate where your aerobic threshold heart rate could be. So, general guidelines to get you started, roughly 75% of your maximum heart rate or roughly 70% of your lactate threshold heart rate. Isn't it 70%? I don't really use lactate. It's like, yeah. And then you fine tune from there. If you're fully conversational, if you can run forever, feel really good at that pace with a minimal cardiac drift, as in your heart rate doesn't keep rising the longer that you're on the run, you've probably found your aerobic threshold. Yeah, it's pretty much that easy. I know we always want, well, tell me exactly how to calculate it. It's calculate and test, right? Calculate, confirm, trust but verify. So having that heart rate alert set up for your easy runs, so helpful. Because it just takes the judgment out of it. It takes the guesswork out of it. It takes you freaking out because you're slower today than you were yesterday out of it. It doesn't matter because hey, I'm in the right intensity zone. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Pace literally does not matter on easy runs at all. Only thing that matters is that you're getting out there and you're staying easy for most of your run. A follow-up question I always get to this is it okay if I'm outside of my easy effort zone for like 10% of the run? And the answer is yeah. The whole point is that it's supposed to just guide you. Now, if you have the alert set up, it is going to buzz at you. So it is going to keep you annoyingly honest. But yes, don't worry about being perfect. Your only goal is to do it properly, not perfectly. What else did I miss? Yeah. Oh my gosh. We didn't talk about like setting up your zones or all of that. So yeah, basics of high, moderate, low intensity, roughly what they do, how to, I think, really effective ways to keep yourself on track in those workouts. And like I said, especially using a tool like your watch, like your COROS watch, to help set up those activity alerts. And there are a whole bunch of other tools that I absolutely love to use. But those are ones that I use daily. Oh, the other feature I use all the time, is what I really like about COROS, is they have this feature. It's like a quick interval workout thing. So when you open up Run, like you go to your watch and you're going to go run. So you have start, and then the next option is basic interval. So basic interval is you can choose how many repeats you want. So the default, I just opened this up. It says 5 repeats. The run interval is 10 minutes. The rest interval is 10 minutes. And the warm up is toggled on and the cool down is toggled on. So obviously you can change any of those, but this is great. If you're just hanging out and you are like, hey, oh, I've got this workout. I've got to do 8 by 2 minutes of blah, blah, blah. Like you can just open this up basic interval tracker and set up this workout super easily without having to build the whole thing as a workout that you then send to your watch. But what I use this feature for is strides and hard uphills. So no warm up, no cool down. After my run, I just stop my run, save it, flick to the basic interval screen, and then program in 6 intervals, 4 intervals, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, minute rest or open rest. It's so easy. So it's always there. And so this is another kind of question I get. Well, how do you know how long they are? How do you time them? How far are they supposed to be? They're just really short intervals. And so having this basic interval function, I honestly, I use it every single time I do strides or hard uphills. Seriously. And I have for years. Well. Thank you so much for being here today for another episode. Like I said, I am thrilled to be partnering with COROS. I found them such a fabulous company and such a really, really great tool to use. And I'm thrilled to be able to share some of those benefits with you as well. As always, don't forget to follow on Instagram, sign up for the weekly Stride newsletter, tune in every week to new episodes. And you can also now join the Patreon for bonus episodes. Got a Discord we're going to get rocking and rolling, behind the scenes stuff, all of the goodness. So I will see you guys next time. Thank you for listening. Visit runningexplained.com to learn more.